If you're new here, don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment with your wildest theory about what you'd do in this situation, and of course, subscribe for more stories where humanity proves it's far stranger and far deadlier than the galaxy ever imagined. Now let's begin. The transmission began with static, then cleared into the raw feed of a reconnaissance drone orbiting a fractured world. Dust storms raged across a jagged canyon, and through the haze, a shape crawled into view. Even in ruin, the beast's outline was unmistakable. Its ridged back spanned 20 meters, its fangs like blades, each breath a thunderous growl. Alien officers seated in the council chamber shifted uneasily. They knew the profile well: apex-class predator, the kind of nightmare species that had ended campaigns, slaughtered entire battalions, and forced empires to sign ceasefires. A hunter of extinction, they whispered, feared even by those who built fleets to burn planets. The feed zoomed closer, showing massive gashes leaking a luminous, acidic ichor. The predator had fallen, wounded, its strength seeping away into the dust. Its death throes should have been celebrated, if not for the impossible detail that followed. From the canyon ridge, a lone figure descended, human-shaped, walking steadily toward the monster instead of fleeing. No squad. No weapons company. Just one man, dressed in the battered combat rig of a soldier long past his war. Elias Ward moved like someone who had forgotten how to hesitate. His armor bore scars that matched his expression, quiet, deliberate, unshaken by the towering horror sprawled before him. A sidearm hung loose at his thigh, but he didn't draw it. Instead, he dropped his pack, kneeling with the clinical precision of someone who had patched too many wounds in battlefields that smelled like burning iron. He examined the predator's injuries with the detached focus of a medic. The council murmured. They had records on him. Human. Former special forces. Vanished from the military rolls years ago. Last seen drifting between colonies taking odd jobs. Salvager, ranger, sometimes bodyguard. Yet here he was, kneeling before death itself, pulling out ration bars and a medkit, as if this were a soldier who had simply collapsed during training. The predator's massive eye rolled toward him, slit pupil narrowing. The air shook with a guttural snarl, warning him to step back. He did not. Elias peeled open a ration, tore it in halves, and tossed the larger piece just beyond the beast's muzzle. For a heartbeat nothing moved, then the predator lunged, jaws snapping down. The sound was brutal, but it did not strike him. It devoured the food instilled, watching. Elias exhaled, almost smiling. Good. You're hungry. That's a start. His voice was low, not soothing but steady. The words weren't for comfort. They were a promise, spoken the way soldiers speak to comrades in foxholes, too tired to lie. He worked quickly, tearing fabric into strips, applying field sealant to the worst of the gashes. Every motion risked his life. A twitch of those claws could have split him in two. But the predator allowed it. Its breathing slowed, and for the first time in its recorded history, the terror of worlds leaned into the hands of a man. Far above, council sensors picked up the impossible readings. No aggression, no imminent strike. The human was not prey. He was tolerated. He was helping. Whispers spread across the chamber. Impossible. A myth unraveling. If one predator could be touched, could be fed, what then? Elias leaned back after an hour's work, shaking sealant from his fingers. The creature's chest rose more evenly now, no longer ragged. He regarded it with the calm scrutiny of a soldier checking a perimeter. He didn't smile, not fully, but there was a glint of recognition in his gaze. He saw intelligence there, a question in the beast's steady eye. You're not dying today, Elias said simply. Then he gathered his pack, built a fire from scavenged brush, and sat near enough that the predator's warmth mingled with the flames. Night fell heavy over the canyon, stars spilling across the sky, and no one in the galaxy could believe what they were seeing. A human sharing camp with the unshareable, resting beside the most feared creature alive. The feed ended there, cutting to static. Council members sat in frozen silence, the chamber heavy with the weight of what they had witnessed. The predator had not torn the human apart. The human had not run. Against every law written by blood and history, a man had chosen mercy. And mercy had not killed him. That was the moment the galaxy realized something had shifted, though none yet understood how far it would go. Elias Ward fed the apex predator, patched its wounds, and set his fire within reach of its fangs. Tomorrow would bring the consequences. But tonight, for the first time in recorded memory, the monster slept beside a man. The fire had burned low by morning, but the heat radiating from the massive body beside it kept the chill at bay. Elias woke to the sound of stone shifting and realized the predator was watching him. Its golden eyes reflected the fire's dying embers, intelligent in a way no report had ever suggested. He reached for his canteen and drank without breaking eye contact, making no sudden movements. The beast did not lunge. Instead, it turned its muzzle toward the canyon wall as if waiting for something. Elias opened a ration pack, breaking another bar in half. He tossed a piece forward, careful to land it within reach but not as bait. The predator sniffed, jaws opening wide to crush it between teeth made for bone. It swallowed, then flicked its tongue, tasting the air. For the first time, Elias allowed himself the faintest smile. It was hunger that kept it still yesterday. Today it was choice. The next hours became a rhythm of survival. Elias collected brush, adjusted the sealant on the creature's wounds and drank in silence. The predator followed with its eyes, no longer baring fangs at his approach. Once, when he drew close to patch a reopened gash, its lips curled back in a warning. He froze, waited, then pressed the sealant anyway. The predator's claws flexed, raking deep trenches into the stone, but it allowed him to finish. That was the moment Elias knew. Trust wasn't granted, it was tested. Far overhead, reconnaissance satellites recorded every second. Council analysts crowded around screens, arguing in hushed tones. The monster should have torn him apart by now. No apex predator tolerated weakness, yet it let him touch its wounds. One scientist whispered a thought no one dared voice loudly: perhaps the human wasn't taming it. Perhaps the predator was taming him. By nightfall, the silence of the canyon broke. A smaller scavenger pack crept from the rocks, hyena-sized quadrupeds with jaws designed to rip carrion. They circled Elias, drawn to the scent of blood. He rose with his rifle, calm as if he had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. One scavenger lunged. The rifle cracked once, the beast collapsed. The rest scattered into shadows. Elias reloaded and glanced toward the predator, expecting rage at the noise. Instead he saw something stranger. The apex beast had shifted, its massive frame angled between Elias and the shadows where the scavengers had fled. The gesture was unmistakable. It had not intervened, but it had acknowledged his part in the fight. Predator and man each watching the other's back. Over the next days, the bond deepened with unspoken exchanges. The predator limped into the brush and returned with a carcass, dragging it with ease. Elias cut sections of meat, cooking his share while the beast consumed the rest raw. Once, when Elias coughed near the fire, the predator lowered its head and released a low rumble, not hostile but resonant, almost questioning. Elias answered without hesitation. "I'm fine. Eat." His words carried no illusion that it understood, yet he spoke anyway. It wasn't for the beast's sake, but his own. He began to study its behavior with a soldier's eye. It didn't strike blindly like reports claimed. It hunted with patience, stalked with precision. When it shifted to rest, it always chose a vantage that allowed sight lines over Elias's position. He noted the patterns, muttering observations under his breath. The predator learned his voice, the tone of command, the cadence of calm. On the 7th night, their tentative companionship was tested. A thunderous roar echoed from the ridge above, followed by the glow of artificial lights. Drop pods slammed into the canyon floor, scattering rock and dust. Elias's hand went to his rifle even before the first mercenary squad emerged, armored and bristling with capture gear. Their target wasn't him, it was the predator. "Stand aside, human," their leader barked through a speaker mask. "There's a bounty for this beast, alive or dead. You interfere, you die with it." Elias didn't move. His stance was deliberate, shoulders squared, rifle lowered but ready. Behind him, the predator rose, its body still weak but towering, its growl reverberating through the canyon walls. The mercenaries hesitated at the sound, just long enough for Elias to speak. "You're welcome to try," he said. His voice was calm, almost conversational. "But I wouldn't bet on your odds." The mercenaries opened fire with stun rounds, nets of crackling energy arcing toward the predator. It roared, tearing free, muscles convulsing with pain yet refusing to collapse. Elias moved with instinct, firing precise bursts, dropping one mercenary then another. His cover fire drove them back, but it was the predator's charge that broke the line. It lunged with terrifying speed, seizing one armored soldier in its jaws, hurling another against the canyon wall. The fight became a blur of steel and flesh, rifle fire and primal fury. Elias fired until his rifle clicked empty, then drew his sidearm, covering the beast as it ripped through the squad. When the last mercenary fell, silence returned, broken only by the predator's ragged breathing. Elias lowered his weapon and turned. The beast was bleeding again, fresh burns scoring its hide, but its gaze fixed on him. For a long moment they stared across the battlefield they had shared. Then the predator lowered its massive head, exhaling with a sound that was almost a sigh. Elias holstered his pistol and stepped closer. The gesture was reckless, suicidal, but he did it anyway. He reached up, resting his hand against the beast's jaw, fingers brushing the ridged scales. "You fought for me," he said quietly. "Guess that makes us even." The predator's eye closed briefly as if in acknowledgement. When it opened again, it did not carry the hunger of before, only something Elias could not yet name. He sat by the fire again that night, the battlefield still reeking of smoke and blood. The beast settled nearby, not looming but resting. Elias studied the stars overhead, thinking of the council, of soldiers, of all the records that said this was impossible. Yet here he was, alive, with the galaxy's most feared predator stretched beside him like a watchful guardian. He broke the silence once more. "If you're sticking around, you need a name. Can't keep calling you it." His gaze lingered on the serrated scars across its body, the ragged resilience it carried. "Riven," he decided. "That's what you are. Torn but unbroken." The predator huffed, a deep rumble stirring dust. Elias chuckled half to himself. "Yeah, Riven it is." The canyon grew quiet again, but the silence was no longer empty. It was the silence of two survivors who had chosen to share the same fire, the same fight, the same path. Tomorrow would bring more hunters, more eyes, more consequences. But tonight, man and monster had crossed the threshold from survival to something far more dangerous. They were no longer strangers. They were becoming a pack. Word of the canyon battle spread faster than Elias could have imagined. Mercenaries who escaped with their lives carried stories that warped with every retelling, but the heart of the tale remained the same. The predator had fought beside a man. No one believed it at first. The apex species had never shown loyalty, had never allied with anything but death. Yet recordings smuggled from their armor cams told a different truth. Grainy footage showed the silhouette of a human at the predator's flank, rifle flashing as the beast ripped through steel and flesh alike. In the council chambers, silence ruled as the evidence played. Scholars who had built careers on the predator's invulnerability stammered into irrelevance. Military strategists argued that this bond, if real, represented a destabilization more dangerous than an entire fleet. The most radical voices demanded annihilation. Destroy the beast, erase the human, bury the footage. But others leaned forward, whispering possibilities that chilled even their allies. If one human could do this, what if more tried? Elias didn't know any of that while he walked the fractured world with Riven. He moved as he always had, one step at a time, cautious but resolute. The predator shadowed him, limping less each day, regaining strength with every hunt. Together they crossed barren ridges and ash-stained valleys. When Elias rested, Riven circled the perimeter, watchful, as if the roles of guardian and beast had blurred. He spoke to it more often now, not because he believed it understood, but because silence gnawed at the edges of his mind. "You're healing fast," he muttered, adjusting a strap on his rifle. "Faster than anything should. You'll be back to tearing apart starships before long." He said it with the grim humor of a soldier, but when Riven tilted its head toward him, he felt a strange certainty that the beast did understand, at least the cadence, the intent, if not the words. At dusk he built a fire. Riven watched, enormous body crouched low, eyes reflecting the flames. Elias stretched his sore limbs and chewed dried meat, while the predator consumed raw slabs from a fresh kill. A bond was forming in the simple act of sharing meals, of acknowledging the other's place at the fire. There was no master, no leash. Only coexistence. But Elias's solitude shattered when a faint signal reached his receiver, piggybacking on open comm channels. The message was short, encoded but unmistakable. A hunter fleet had been dispatched. Their target was not just the predator but him. He sat in silence after hearing it, gaze locked on the fire's glow. The galaxy couldn't allow what he and Riven had become. They would erase him to protect the lie that these beasts were untamable. He glanced at Riven, who lifted its head as if sensing the weight in his thoughts. "They're coming for you," Elias whispered. "And for me." His fingers tightened around the receiver, knuckles pale. "Guess we're in this together." Meanwhile the council plotted. The chamber filled with tension as species of every empire debated the risk. The hunters they dispatched were not common mercenaries. They were elite units trained for centuries, their tools designed specifically to ensnare predators. Nets of gravitic force, weapons that disrupted neural currents, traps laid with precision. They had always succeeded before. But this time the quarry wasn't alone. A human soldier walked at its side, unpredictable and reckless. That made him far more dangerous than the beast. Elias sensed the pressure closing in with each sunrise. Drones skimmed the skies, too high to shoot down, their presence an omen. Riven growled at their distant hum, hackles bristling, and Elias laid a steadying hand against its hide. "Let them watch," he said. "They'll get more than they bargained for." He prepared without fanfare. Mines from old caches, scavenged charges, traps fashioned from terrain. Every canyon wall became a weapon in his mind, every ridge a line of fire. He remembered campaigns where soldiers had survived impossible odds by turning the land itself against their enemies. Now he would do the same, but not for a nation, not for a cause. This time it was for survival, and for the strange, wordless trust he had found in the company of a monster. One evening, as the stars burned sharp overhead, Elias sat against the canyon wall cleaning his rifle. Riven lay nearby, tail curled, a steady rhythm of breath vibrating the ground. Elias spoke softly, almost to himself. "You know, they'll never stop. Even if we fight them off, more will come. They don't forgive things that scare them." He paused, oiling the bolt with practiced ease. "But I've seen enough to know you're not what they think. You're not just a weapon. You're more than they'll ever admit." The predator stirred, rumbling deep in its chest. Elias reached out, resting his hand against its massive side. The contact was simple, but it held the weight of an oath. Neither would face what came alone. Far above, the hunter fleet entered orbit, sleek ships glinting against the void. Their commander watched planetary scans with cold efficiency. To him, this was no different from countless hunts before. Capture or kill, neutralize the threat, erase the anomaly. Yet he couldn't ignore the unease gnawing at him as he replayed the smuggled footage. A man standing shoulder to shoulder with a predator, unflinching, unafraid. The image defied everything his doctrine had taught him. He silenced the thought with a command: "Prepare the drop teams." On the surface, Elias knew the time was close. The air tasted sharper, the nights heavier. He checked his rifle one last time and looked toward Riven, who lifted its head and met his gaze. No words were needed. The predator's presence was enough. "They'll be here tomorrow," Elias said, voice steady but low. "And when they come, we'll show them what happens when you corner survivors." The fire cracked, sending sparks into the dark. Riven lowered its head beside him, close enough that Elias felt the heat of its breath. In the silence that followed, the canyon seemed to hold its breath as well, as if waiting for the storm to break. The hunters were descending, confident in their skill, sure of their weapons. Elias and Riven sat together beneath the stars, knowing the fight ahead would define not just their survival, but the future of everything that feared them. And in that quiet moment before the clash, man and predator had never been closer to understanding each other. The first tremors came before dawn, distant but undeniable. Elias lay awake, one hand resting on the stock of his rifle, listening to the sky tear open. Dropships knifed through the upper atmosphere, their engines screaming, their contrails glowing like scars against the pale horizon. He rose without hesitation, checking the charges he had buried in the canyon walls, the trip lines strung between jagged rocks, the old mines he had coaxed back to life with scavenged parts. Every preparation had been made for this moment. When he glanced at Riven, the predator already stood alert, head tilted toward the rising dust, eyes narrowed. The hunters arrived with precision. Pods slammed into the canyon floor, deploying armored soldiers in formation. Their weapons glowed with the cruel confidence of design. Gravitic nets, shock lances, disruptors meant to scramble even a predator's nervous system. These were not mercenaries. They were professionals, bred and trained for this one task. Their commander's voice rang over the comms, amplified and cold. "Target identified. Predator and human asset are to be neutralized." Elias crouched behind an outcrop, rifle steady. He did not waste breath on curses or bravado. He only whispered to himself as he had in other wars, "Steady hands. Sharp eyes." Then he triggered the first charge. The explosion tore through the canyon wall, raining boulders onto the lead formation. 2 hunters vanished beneath the collapse, their screams muffled by stone. The rest scattered, shouting commands, weapons raised. In that heartbeat of confusion, Riven struck. The predator leapt from the ridge like a storm made flesh, its claws slicing through armor, jaws snapping down on steel and bone. Soldiers who had hunted these creatures for generations found themselves prey to something far worse, a beast fighting not alone but with a man at its flank. Elias fired in sync with Riven's movements, each shot precise, cutting down soldiers who aimed their nets at the beast. Together they carved chaos into the ordered advance. The hunters rallied quickly. Nets flared, tangling Riven's limbs, dragging it down with gravitic force. The predator roared, body convulsing as arcs of energy seared its hide. Elias sprinted forward, cutting through the lines, firing into emitters, planting explosives on anchors. He fought with ruthless efficiency, not reckless but deliberate, every bullet placed as though he could not afford waste. Riven tore free with a surge of raw strength, flinging shredded nets aside, blood pouring but eyes burning with rage. The canyon became a war zone of fire and dust. Hunter squads pressed from every angle, their discipline unshaken, their tactics relentless. Elias countered with terrain, luring them into choke points, triggering detonations that split their formations. Riven fought like a force of nature, leaping from rock to rock, smashing soldiers beneath its weight, swiping aside shock lances that shattered stone. More than once, Elias found himself cornered, only to feel the ground shake as Riven landed between him and death, claws rending apart the threat. But the hunters adapted. They focused fire, herding the predator into open ground where nets could converge. Riven staggered, snarling as the traps layered, its movements slowed. The commander advanced with calculated certainty, raising a disruptor tuned to lethal output. For the first time, Elias felt the edge of despair. He charged anyway. With his rifle empty, he hurled himself forward, firing his sidearm into the commander's armor, diving low to plant an explosive at his feet. The detonation hurled both of them backward. Elias hit the ground hard, ears ringing, vision blurred. He dragged himself up, chest heaving, just in time to see the commander stumble, alive but disoriented. Riven surged forward, tearing through the nets, seizing the commander in its jaws and snapping him like a dry branch. The sight shattered the hunters' discipline. Fear, pure and corrosive, spread through their ranks. Some broke formation. Others fired wildly, losing cohesion. Elias pushed himself upright, blood running from a cut on his temple, and shouted into the chaos, his voice raw but unyielding. "You don't hunt us. We hunt you." Riven roared beside him, the sound shaking stone loose from the canyon walls. It was no longer a beast to them, it was something unthinkable, a predator shielded by a human fighting as one half of a pair. The hunters faltered. Their retreat began as a ripple and swelled into a rout. Dropships lifted off, engines howling as survivors scrambled aboard, abandoning their dead, abandoning their mission. When the last ship clawed into the sky, silence fell again, heavy and absolute. Smoke curled from the shattered earth, mingling with the acrid tang of burned circuits and blood. Elias stood swaying, exhaustion and adrenaline pulling at him, but he refused to collapse. He turned toward Riven. The predator bled from fresh wounds, its scales scorched, its breath ragged. Yet its eyes were steady, locked on him. Slowly, with effort, it lowered itself until its massive head bowed before him, not in weakness but in recognition. Elias stepped forward, resting his hand against the beast's scarred muzzle, his voice low, meant only for the two of them. "We did it. Together." Riven's chest heaved, and for a moment Elias feared it would fall. But then it exhaled, a sound that carried not rage, not hunger, but something closer to weary acknowledgement. The bond that had begun with food and mercy had been sealed in blood and fire. Above, the last hunter ship broke orbit, transmitting a single report to the council: failure. A human and a predator had fought as one, and no force sent against them had prevailed. In the chamber where leaders once argued about impossibility, silence reigned once more, heavier than before. Elias watched the horizon where the ships had vanished, his hand still resting against Riven's hide. The fight was over, but the war had only begun. He could feel it in his bones, in the way the galaxy would never forgive what they had done here. He spoke again, more to himself than to the predator. "They'll come back. Stronger. Smarter." Riven's growl rumbled through the ground, a sound Elias interpreted as agreement. He nodded, weary but resolute. "Then we'll be ready." The canyon lay in ruins around them, the smoke slowly drifting skyward, carrying the scent of victory and defiance. Elias and Riven stood together in that silence, survivors bound by trust and necessity, knowing the galaxy had seen something it could never unsee. The apex predator had a companion now, and the man had something far rarer, a reason to keep fighting. The chamber's walls vibrated with the weight of alien voices, the sound echoing like distant thunder through the High Council's crystalline hall. Men who had walked into firefights without flinching suddenly felt small under the weight of thousands of eyes. Elias stood at the center, shoulders squared, his hand resting against the thick mane of the beast beside him. The predator's golden eyes flickered between hunger and loyalty, its scarred frame hunched low as if ready to strike, yet calm because his touch anchored it. Across from them, Ambassador Reiner's voice cut through the tension. Do you not see what this means? The human has tamed the untamable. The council cannot ignore the implications. His words dripped with both awe and unease. Merrick shifted slightly at Elias's side, his jaw tightening. He'd followed his friend through jungles, deserts, and wars, but here, under alien starlight and judgment, he felt the world tilting. What Elias had done was more than reckless mercy. It was rewriting the laws every species in the galaxy had accepted as absolute. Elias's gaze moved steadily around the chamber. He saw fear disguised as reason, calculation cloaked as debate, but beneath it all, a hunger for control. These leaders didn't want to understand the bond he'd formed. They wanted to weaponize it, to bend predator and man into symbols of dominance. I didn't chain him, Elias said, his voice steady but carrying an edge that cut through the murmurs. I fed him. I treated him as a being, not a beast. That's why he stands here beside me instead of tearing this hall apart. His hand stayed on the predator's fur, grounding both of them. What you see isn't power. It's trust. The council chamber rippled with whispers. Some scoffed, others leaned forward. Marek's eyes flicked over them, recognizing in their faces the same mix he'd seen in soldiers before a battle. Doubt, envy, dread. A counselor with silvered scales slammed his clawed hand against the podium. You have upset the balance of this galaxy. For millennia, no creature dared touch the predators of the Black Rift. They were forces of nature, not allies. And now you make one, your pet. The predator growled low, the sound vibrating through Elias's bones, but he did not waver. Instead, he took a slow step closer, bringing the beast with him, and let the silence stretch until even the whispers died. I didn't make him my pet, Elias said, voice firm. He chose me. The words landed like a detonation. Gasps rippled. Even Marek's breath caught, though he had lived the truth of it, had seen the creature limp toward Elias, bleeding and broken, had watched it bow its massive head to the man who dared extend bread instead of a blade. The chamber erupted in overlapping voices. Dangerous. Unnatural. Weaponize them. Control the humans. The argument spun like a storm, but Elias only looked down at the predator. The beast pressed its head against his leg, the closest thing its kind had to a gesture of devotion. Merrick leaned in, whispering through clenched teeth. You know what they'll decide. They'll try to take him from you. And when they fail, they'll come for Earth. Elias's eyes hardened, a steel glint beneath the calm. Then let them try. The council speaker rose, her crystalline form refracting starlight, and raised her hand for silence. The chamber stilled. Her voice rang out, equal parts verdict and warning. Human Elias. The council cannot permit this bond to go unchecked. Either the creature is surrendered for study, or both of you will be exiled beyond the borders of civilized space. Marek's stomach clenched, but Elias only smirked, the corner of his mouth curling like a man already 10 moves ahead in a dangerous game. He crouched slightly, whispering to the predator, and the beast's eyes flared, muscles rippling as though it understood what was at stake. Then Elias straightened, his voice carrying across the vast hall. You call yourself civilized, yet you tremble at trust. You speak of law, yet you cloak fear in the language of order. You want him? Come and take him. The predator rose in full, towering, scarred hide gleaming beneath the chamber's lights. 100 guards flinched, weapons twitching toward readiness, but none dared move first. The beast's growl was not just sound, it was a promise of annihilation. Merrick stepped forward, his own voice suddenly cutting through. You're all missing the truth. If one man can earn this creature's loyalty, then it means every boundary you believed in can be broken. Not with fear. With courage. With respect. That's humanity's gift. And you're right to be afraid. Silence fell again, heavier than before. The counselors looked between the predator, the unyielding man who had fed it, and the soldier standing at his side. Slowly, the speaker lowered her hand. Her crystalline body caught the light in a fractured prism as she spoke. So be it. The human bond will stand, for now. But if it unravels, the blood will be on your hands. Elias bowed his head slightly, not in deference but in acknowledgement. He had won, not through dominance but by forcing them to face what they feared most, change. As they left the chamber, the predator padding silently behind, Merrick glanced at his friend. You know they'll come for us sooner or later. They won't stop with words. Elias smiled faintly, his hand brushing once more against the predator's fur. Then we'll be ready. Because the galaxy just learned something it can never unlearn. Merrick chuckled under his breath, the tension breaking just enough to feel human again. What's that? Elias looked out across the alien city, where spires reached into the sky and ships blazed across the horizon. His eyes were hard, but there was warmth in them too, an unshakable conviction. That the deadliest predator in the universe, he said, nodding to the beast at his side, isn't the one with claws or fangs. It's the one that learns to trust a human. The predator rumbled low, almost like laughter, and pressed closer to him. And for the first time in the galaxy's history, the future shifted, not because of fear but because one man dared to feed a wounded monster and call it a friend.